Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. Sorry, I forgot to shut the door. Anyway, how are you? Hope you're well. Things are strange, eh? Things are different. Things are not the way they're supposed to be. Things are not the way we're used to them being, but it is a Friday and there is an Arsecast. So that's about as much as I can do for you. Can't do anything about all the rest of it. I wish I could. Oh, God, I wish I could. But I don't have that magic, unfortunately. It's all very weird, isn't it? It's just the idea of going somewhere now is extremely appealing. And I don't mean necessarily a holiday. I don't mean a trip to a far-flung destination. I don't mean going somewhere I've never been before. I'd just like to go to my local and just have a pint. Down to Onshaw on Camden Street and have a pint of Scraggy Bay and eat a packet of peanuts and sit there and watch the regulars come in and out and notice all the people that you notice around town. You know, if you live in a city or if you live in a specific area of a city, you will see people on a regular basis. They may not know you, they may not recognize you, but you recognize them because you see them every day of the week. You walk down the road and there they are. There's the man who has the bandage on his head. Every time you see him, he's got a bandage on his head. He's carrying a newspaper and he's got a bandage on his head, a fresh one. What? Why? Why has he got the I don't know why he's got it, but he's got it. He's there and I see him or saw him almost every day of the week. The cast of characters that are in your life that you don't even realize are kind of important to it because they give you this sense of sameness. I don't know if sameness is the right word, but it's sort of regularity. This is where I am. These are the people who are around me, and this is the way it is. And now it's not the way it is, and I don't know what any of those people are doing, and I find it strange. I've got two big dogs, and they need to get out, and that's fine. And I've been getting out with the dogs, and that's some measure of normality because dogs don't know that there's a pandemic. Dogs don't care that there's a pandemic. There's a park to go to. There's a stick to chase. There's a rock to pick up. There's a river to wade through. The dogs are as happy as they've ever been, and that's great. And you can find some kind of happiness in that. But my dad is a little way away from me, not too far up the road. It's about a 10-minute drive, 5-10-minute drive. But you're not supposed to go more than 2 kilometers from your house because of the rules that we have. And a couple of times this week I've been stopped by the police, by the Gardaí, on the way back down. And they're asking, where are you going? Where are you coming from? And you explain it to them and everything is fine. And they're like, well, that's cool. And they're very nice about it. But it's still really odd, like the increased police presence. I understand it, but I don't know. I mean, what if it takes a left turn and all of a sudden those interactions are not as pleasant and not as polite? It's not too much of a stretch, considering that 8 weeks ago, none of us thought we would be where we are now. So where we're going to be in 6 or 8 weeks' time, I just can't tell you. I was up in my dad's house the other day with him, and he had the news on. He had CNN on, or one of those channels, and they have a ticker. They have like at the top, it sort of tells you how many people are infected in the world, and it was coming up on 750,000, something like that, and then it gives you the total of the people who've died, and you're looking at it thinking, okay, we need information. Information is important. But where's the balance between telling people what they need to know and something that's, a number, an abstract number there for a kind of weird entertainment way? I don't know how to describe it. Like it's just going to go up and up and up and up and up. Like, do the numbers change color? Do they flash red as they get higher? I don't know. I just find it quite surreal looking at stuff like that. But what can you do? other than talk about it at the start of a podcast to make it a profoundly depressing intro, my apologies. I do apologize for that. This week we have been doing lots of stuff to try and keep you entertained. Of course, we had the Arsecast Extra on Monday, and we had a great podcast with Ian Wright talking about David Rocastle on Tuesday. And for our Patreon members, there was an episode of My Arse, in which I talked to an Arsenal fan about their life and times as an Arsenal fan, which kind of was the case, but not necessarily, with Philippe Auclair, who you've listened to on this podcast many times before, but he has another life, another side to him, and we explore that on the Patreon. Also, we did a live stream, myself and James and Elliot from the Arsenal Vision podcast, and we will try and do as much as we can to keep you entertained, distracted, and vaguely amused. I think if I can keep you vaguely amused over the coming weeks and months, I'll be content with that. So let's get on with today's show. My first guest is a football writer. He's been on the show lots of times before. Delighted to welcome back Daniel Storey. Hi, Daniel.
Hi there, you all right?
I am all right. How are you doing? You know, as a freelance football journalist, these are trying times.
They are. I'm very lucky to have a book project ongoing, and I could hug and kiss both the subject and the publisher at the moment. And after that, it will go very quiet, I think. May, June, July, potentially. But, you know, got my health, and that's the main thing.
That's a very good way of looking at it. Well, what are you missing most about football? And, you know, look, I know there are big, wide issues that should concern us all and everything else. And I think what's going on is putting football in perspective for a lot of people. Nevertheless, football is still a great thing. You can think football is still a brilliant thing and realize it's not the most important thing in the world. So, you know, what are you missing most, if not necessarily from a work point of view, but just as a football fan?
The live matches, obviously, both as a journalist and as a fan. I mean, clearly we have a summer break and we have international breaks every year, so maybe it feels a little bit like that at the moment, but it's that removal of footballers' normality, I think, that is hampering a lot of people. It's at a time when everything else is non-normal and we're having to change our behaviours and change how we live. I think not having football there is that constant, and it has become a constant over the last decade. Yeah, that's the real punishing thing for me. Feels
like football would be a great thing to tide us over during this. If we had football, it'd make things easier. But of course, you know, that's not the case, and it might not be the case for some time. You know, we'll come to that in a moment. But just reflecting on what's happening in the game and what's happening in life and society and all of those things, what we think will happen with football and what is going to happen with football are very difficult to predict, because the scale of this virus and the impact that it's having on everybody is unprecedented, and it changes so quickly from one week to the next. We've seen stories this week, for example, about player wages and staff at certain clubs being let go or being asked to take part in government schemes and those kind of things. How do we view football clubs and how they treat their staff at this moment in time? Because some of them are obviously doing the right thing and committing to paying staff and casual staff. Others are seeking to take advantage of government schemes, etc., etc. Should we be surprised that in some cases there's a lack of what you might consider morality from football club owners?
I don't think we should be surprised, if I'm brutally honest. I feel that this is a period of our lives after which we will come out with pretty changed views of our priorities and of what really matters. And I think football would be too arrogant if it believed it could exist outside of that. It has long existed in its own bubble in terms of, you know, cultural finances and, you know, rapid wage rises and transfer fees. But I think football is going to have to realise that it isn't able to escape that anymore. And those people, those owners who choose self-interest and greed over morality, history will judge them accordingly. I honestly believe that, and I honestly hope that. I hope that we don't get to a stage where, when football does immediately come back, and let's say it opens with a transfer window, that clubs who are then pursuing £20 million, £30 million players who haven't looked after their casual staff, I hope the game will judge them accordingly, because it's disgraceful. That government retention scheme was was intended to avoid mass redundancies and was intended to help out those companies, those businesses who wouldn't be able to survive otherwise. Football can survive. The big Premier League clubs can survive without mass redundancies and this scheme. And choosing to use it, to me, feels like a pretty dismal move, if not surprising.
The scale, of wealth when it comes to ownership of Premier League football clubs is, I don't suppose it's anything that will surprise people, but and I know Wikipedia isn't necessarily the be all and end all when it comes to accurate information, but just as a sort of a guideline thing here, they have a list of Premier League clubs and a list of owners and their combined net worth. Now, I know football clubs can exist as part of a sidearm to the main business, etc., but only 5 of the 20 Premier League clubs have a net worth below $1 billion, and those are Bournemouth, Burnley, what's the other one we have here? Norwich City, Sheffield United, and the other one is Watford. Every other club is well above $1 billion. And you're looking at some, for example, Arsenal. Its relevant Stan Kroenke's net worth is enormous, estimated around $9 billion. We know about Chelsea. We know about Manchester City, Liverpool, Manchester United. All these clubs have these vast resources. I want to ask you about players now in a minute, because there is a certain a growing idea that the top players should take wage cuts, which could help the rest of the staff at the club, and we've seen that happen in other clubs in other countries. But shouldn't the focus first and foremost be on the owners, because they are the ones with this vast wealth, even if it isn't all cash in hand and liquid?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're two separate entities, but the buck should not be passed from the owner to the players. I honestly agree. I agree with you I agree with the principle that players should take a wage cut. And it hasn't happened yet. I hope that's just because it takes a fair amount of organisation and administration, and thrashing out the details of that will take time. I think it probably should have already happened. I think there should have been a statement of intent that would have earned them some goodwill. But I do believe that will happen at some point. But the owners should not be allowed to pass the buck. These owners have got into positions of vast wealth, probably through the same business practices, the same pursuit of wealth that is formulating some of their opinions now, which is that, well, I'm going to look after my own interests first, and there's no reason why I should take a hit just because there's a coronavirus. But there's a morality to this. It's not purely business. Football clubs like to play fast and loose with that idea of being businesses. They like to pursue a capitalist dream, but then they also enjoy an incredible amount of loyalty from its customers. If Tottenham treat its staff dismally, if Tottenham was a washing powder, you might buy a different washing powder, but fans are not going to go and support Arsenal or Chelsea because their club has mistreated its staff. So that loyalty creates a responsibility to uphold a degree of morality, in my mind, and we haven't seen that so far, unfortunately. And
of course we know as well that it's extremely difficult to break the bonds between a club and a fans. As a fan, you're invested in this club for probably a lifetime, since you were a kid, and to walk away, football clubs, and I include Arsenal in this, can behave sometimes in ways which really doesn't sit right with you, but because you have this addiction, affliction, whatever you want to call it, it becomes very difficult to walk away. And, I think over recent years, we have seen people who have said, no, I've had enough. I don't like what this is. I don't like the way it's going. I don't like the way I'm treated as a customer, a client, a source of money, rather than a fan or a supporter. And that ties into the business side of things. So, yeah, I mean, there is I guess, a sort of inherent desire or belief on the part of a football club that they can behave in certain ways because they know that they're not going to get a great deal of kickback for it.
Yeah, exactly. But I do believe honestly that this is a sea change moment for our society and our culture in general. And I think people will be more prepared or less prepared to turn a blind eye to that sort of behaviour. You mentioned fans. if clubs continue to charge ever increasing ticket prices, well, people are going to be less financially well off after this. They're going to have to make sacrifices. They're going to have to make choices. And the reality is, if they believe that the club is, over this period, has not looked out for them, has not looked out for the casual staff, has not looked out for those on the very lowest, with the very lowest ability to cope, then I think it will create a backlash. I think we're probably already seeing that.
Just in terms of the players and the idea that players should take, the top players should take a pay cut, in order to help the rest of the club survive. And there's something honourable about that. Again, you come back to the idea that, maybe it shouldn't be like that. But it is a reality, and it is potentially something which could help a lot of football clubs. Nick Harris, who I'm sure you follow and many people do, who's at Sporting Intel on Twitter, says at Premier League level, at most clubs, and he has most in kind of inverted commas there, the top 25, 30 earners taking a pay cut of 25% for 3 to 6 months would mean nobody on the non-playing staff would need any cuts at all. He says it's complex. Nobody should force this on the players, but it is doable and invaluable PR. There's an argument that, because you earn a lot of money, your lifestyle is different. You need a lot of money to keep up that lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera. But, I think if there is to be a football that we can all get behind in the future, something like this would definitely sit well with fans, that if at least the players are willing to make a sacrifice, if not the owners, then they can be held up as an example, and we can bring the rest of them to the guillotine afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, my personal view is that players shouldn't take a wage cut for its own sake, because I think that just saves the club money, which is not really what this is about. I think that there has to be a scheme whereby the money that the players saved is fully counted up, and that money, as we said, should go to that non-playing staff, and also I think should go to subsidising ticket prices and travel for supporters when this is finally over. Because I think if you could do the figures and let's say players take a cut, and for example it creates a pot of £10 million over 3 months or 6 months, that £10 million is then quantifiable and can then be divvied out accordingly, whether it's community schemes, whether it's playing non-playing staff, whether it's subsidising ticket prices. It has to be a cause of giving something back. I'm not interested in players taking a pay cut purely to save the club money, because the reason for them to do that is to create a wealth distribution at a time when the country needs it most. Are
you in any way surprised that at a time when in many countries businesses are being told you cannot open, small, medium, even some large size businesses are not allowed to open because they're not considered essential services? And we understand, I think, all the reasons why those restrictions have been put in place, to stop the spread of the virus and to flatten the curve and to get ourselves, back on track, as a society, and to ensure that people's health and well-being, is protected. Old people are not just there to be sacrificed for this virus so we can continue with capitalism. So, people who really can't afford to do it, people who live month to month in terms of their wages, their income, their rents, all childcare, all those kind of things, and business owners who need to be open day after day, week after week after week to keep their businesses going and liquid, are now, in a situation where they just cannot do it. They are not allowed to do it. And yet we're hearing constantly about these ideas about football being brought back, games played behind closed doors, as a way of fulfilling contracts that they have with broadcasting institutions. There's an interesting story this morning on the Evening Standard by James Ollie. A law firm is claiming that overseas broadcasters are exploring the possibility of suing the Premier League if the current season is not completed. And apparently in France, Canal Plus is not paying the next batch of money that they have to pay to the France Football Federation or the Football League in France to broadcast their games. So these monetary concerns are driving this idea. Why is football, or why should football as a business be any different from anyone else?
Yeah, it shouldn't. It is. As I say, it has enjoyed this pedestal that it stood on above pretty much every other cultural entity in this country and globally. And this virus, the one thing about this virus is that it pays no respect. It's completely universal. Nobody can stand above it and say, well, we're not affected. I know that they have this idea of creating camps where squads and players can stay in, but it just doesn't work for me. But we have to remember that the Premier League was perfectly happy for games to go on until Mikel Arteta contracted the virus, and it was only him contracting the virus that stopped them carrying on playing matches. It wasn't the idea of, well, hang on, the country is entering a time of crisis here. Maybe we need to take a look at ourselves and look at what really matters. It wasn't that at all. And as you say, the arranging of games, the desperate clamour to get games put on is not to provide that sense of normality to supporters. It's not to provide that link to a social pursuit that they consider dear. It's a pursuit of television money. Nothing more, nothing less.
The perception, I think, is that football clubs are rich, which, they deal in huge amounts of money and everything else. But I think when you look at the profits that they turn, they're not necessarily massive when it comes to, big industry. Do you think there's a sort of panic on behalf of the football clubs that the way that they operate is so dependent on, obviously, television money, gate receipts, things like transfers, which may or may not be anywhere near as lucrative as they were beforehand, that it's sort of bringing into focus the precarious nature of the way these clubs operate, buying a player and you pay the transfer fee over X amount of years and what have you. And that makes sense because you can't just pay £100 million in cash for a player if you're buying that kind of a player. But it does sort of suggest that maybe they need to think about how they're run and how they're operating as businesses. If a shutdown for just even 6 weeks, 8 weeks, maybe 3 months can have such a profound impact.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is a huge wake-up call for English football, not just at Premier League level, but we hear often about this idea of a football family, and it's a very sugary cliche, but we are finding out now that clubs are going to have to help each other if we want our league structure to continue as we have known it for so long. And if we consider the English league structure to be sacrosanct as a traditional and a historic entity, then there is going to have to be some degree of wealth distribution, because otherwise it will simply not exist as it does. It really won't, because nobody could have seen a period of 6 months without any football, but it doesn't say much for the precarious nature of those clubs that they cannot exist. And let's face it, we'd already seen before the coronavirus that the Football League was creaking, that clubs were on the very brink of financial apocalypse, and this has only brought that into starker focus.
And what about the idea that players, if again, coming back to the idea that if your regular Joe Soap can't go to work because it's not safe for him to do so, because, either for him or for everybody else, this sort of chain of infection or whatever. What about the idea that footballers, just because they earn a lot of money or just because we need entertainment, should be asked to do this? It feels, that camp idea that was put out there earlier in the week or late last week. To me, that felt very much like almost a dystopian entertainment conglomerate thing that, okay, these guys are kind of expendable. It doesn't matter what happens to them as long as we get our football fix.
Yeah, and I think we saw that with the testing of players prior to the game ceasing for the season, because there was already an outcry from the public that said, hang on a minute, football is football, but nothing matters now. This is completely universal. We're all on the same standing. If tests are available, then why are they not being given to NHS workers in hospitals? I don't want to stray dangerously close to the give soldiers footballers wages line, but we are getting closer to that standpoint now, I think, where we have to assess football's importance in in the context of a global virus. And the reality is it doesn't matter. And the reality is that our resources now must go to the most vulnerable, must go to those who are most able to fight the virus, not those who are most able to entertain football supporters.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to say to that other than, I wish it would happen, but I don't think it will. Well, certainly not to the extent that we might like it to. Just looking forward, and I know it's really hard to predict, but the issues of player contracts and things like that come into focus because they're all supposed to end on June 30th, and loan players and players out of contract and what have you. And we don't know when football is going to start again. We keep hearing, or we heard quite often at the start, where in terms of the spread of the virus in the UK and in Ireland, that we're sort of 2 weeks behind Italy. And here we are at the start of April, and Italy is still experiencing a horrendous situation with hundreds of deaths every day. And it feels like it's going to be a long time before football gets started there again. Therefore, it's going to be a long time before football starts here again. Nobody, I think, has the right answer to this, because it's just impossible, and it's probably something that will be worked out by lawyers and business people. But the idea that football might not begin again until much later this year is not something we can really escape.
No, and we also can't escape that there is likely to be another peak in this virus when everyone stops social distancing for a while, and when next winter comes around, which is why, my belief is that we should complete the season as and when we can. If that means that 2020-21 becomes a very different football season, whether it's a shorter one or maybe even just that it takes the course of another season just to complete this season, so be it. It would upset me very greatly, and it makes me feel as a freelance journalist, it makes me feel like a turkey voting for Christmas. But if that's what it takes, that's what it takes, because the worst thing to do would be to pretend everything was normal, to try and start playing football again, and then after 2 weeks realise that, okay, we're going to need another 3-month break here, because that's when it gets really messy and bitty. I think the responsibility is to wait until a period of time when it is fully safe, and that comes from a governmental point of view, to carry on social life as normal. I don't think football should be in any way given first dibs on being the guinea pig for re-beginning social life. For sure.
And I think it would be, from a governmental point of view, and I know people out there are doing their jobs as best they can, but it would be great to hear science journalists and medical journalists quizzing the politicians for a bit rather than just the political ones. And I'm not saying that in any disparaging way to political journalists who are doing their best, I'm sure, but the more expert knowledge and information we have, the better when it comes to dealing with this thing. But look, we'll see what happens. It's going to be a way down the road, and people are going to have to stay inside, and they're going to have to entertain themselves and stay isolated. And it's difficult for a lot of people, I know, for very, very many reasons. But what we try and do on the podcast in the last little while is give people a couple of recommendations of things that they might use to pass the time. So I've asked you to pick a couple of football books, if you wouldn't mind. So what's your first one?
The first one is, because people have got so much time on their hands now, is The Ball is Round by David Goldblatt, which is it's almost a textbook, although it's a very readable textbook. But it's the football Bible. It's a complete history of football told in a very engaging way. It's 900 pages, so you'll be able to fill your time with that. And then the other one I went for is completely different, which is The Miracle of Castel di Sangro, which might feel a little bit hard to read now, given that it's about both football and travel, both of which are impossible. But it's an incredible story told by a person who had the wherewithal to document all of it as he went, about a very small club in a small town in Italy that made it big. That was what I had written down here as well. I was just going to give one to back up your one, and that was one. And I think it really is one of the most amazing football books I've ever read. The sort of incredulity that he has when he discovers how the game works in Italy, certain customs, if you like, that take place, and he just cannot get his head around it. And everyone is going on with things as normal, and he's looking at this going, this is crazy.
crazy. What are you doing?
Yes.
But also, I like the way he decided. He was a tactical expert as well, and decided, giving the various coaches his tactical advice.
It both feels very, very naive, but also incredibly well pulled off, which is a winning combination.
That's The Miracle of Castel di Sangro by Joe McGuinness. Okay, Daniel, listen, we'll leave it there. Thanks a million for talking to us. Stay safe and stay healthy, and we'll talk to you again soon, I hope.
And you, thank you.
That's Daniel Storey. You can find him on Twitter. He is at Daniel Storey85, at Daniel Storey85. Right, seeing as there is no football, I thought it might be interesting to try and find some people to talk to for the podcast who are Arsenal connected, but not in a football way, if you like. They're not sort of journalists or bloggers or podcasters or what have you. They're Arsenal fans who might be doing interesting things in the world, out in that big bad world, or certainly were doing interesting things when we were allowed go out and do interesting things. Today's guest is the drummer for one of the biggest acts in the world right now. Her name is Lana del Rey, and his name is Tom Marsh. Hello to you, Tom.
Hello, sir. How you doing?
I'm all right. I kind of forget how we came to interact. I think it was through Instagram.
Yes, I've been listening to you and James for many moons.
Yeah.
And I think, I maybe reached out to you on Instagram and said hi. And we started following those Instagram stories on each other, I think, didn't we?
Yeah, I think so.
It was a few months ago. But I've been listening to you and James for many moons as a touring musician.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this about a year ago. I'm the drummer for Lana Del Rey, is my main gig that people may know me for. But we were playing in Chile, and I had this awful gig where I play with a real kit and an electronic kit. So I have these two drum kits, this big sprawling bunch of technology, and the robot kit just died on me the night before. We're playing in front of like 80,000 people. And so I woke up the next day in a hotel room in Chile and just feeling mildly devastated. We got through the gig all right, and the humans are just ecstatic if they can see Lana anyway, so you can get away with murder. If things grind to a halt, she strolls down to the crowd, does a papal visit, and everyone froths at the mouth, and you can get back to fixing your droids or whatever. But anyway, the following morning, I opened the curtains, and there's a mountain with a castle on the top of it. And I'm like, I'm just going to go up that mountain and not think about this horrific show the night before. And I put on your podcast. So I'm listening to you and James. I can't remember what the storyline was that week, but, just I have you two as these kind of virtual mates as I climb this mountain with this kind of flock of stray dogs following me up this cliff path. And I'm chuckling away. It was just quite a surreal moment.
Yeah, it is weird.
I've had you with me for many moons, basically.
Well, that's cool. I mean, it's when you think about life and when you think about, where you might end up in whatever terms you consider your career going in, was there ever a point where you envisaged yourself walking up a mountain in Chile to visit a castle because your robot drum kit wouldn't work the night before in front of 80,000 people? I mean, that itself is quite a surreal thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been it was a strange shift, and it was instantly considerably bigger than a lot of the stuff I did before. I basically signed up for what I thought was going to be a European, potentially a bit of American tour, but it was beginning of 2013. I thought I was signing up for 6 months, and now I'm in my 8th year. Everything's ground to a halt because of this goddamn plague. But it was basically the first year we did a bunch of rehearsals in London. The rest of the band's American. She's American, but she's got British management. So the manager knew me for various projects before where I would drum and produce and sort of multitask in different acts. And so it was easy to get the audition initially. But, I did a few weeks of rehearsal with the band, super professional, long-ass days, getting the thing together. And then the warm-up show, in inverted commas, was 5,000 people in like a French town. And, that was probably, I'd done festivals with other bands and things before. So I played to big crowds on the odd show. But, it was straight into arena tour of Europe, sold out. I mean, she was really starting to kick off at that point. So, and within a year, you've been on private jets, you've been all around the globe. I hadn't really toured the States, and then that sort of really blew my mind towards the end of it. And that's why I'm living in New York now and haven't been for years.
Right.
But I just never left because I got the American visa, which is impossible to to get. And I was like, this is a nice place to be.
Yeah.
And I was sort of done with London at that point. So
let's come back to that, because I'm sure there are some stories we can go through from your time touring and what have you. But originally, where are you from, and what is your connection to Arsenal? How have you got this affliction that we all have that torments us and enrages us and gives us joy in, well, I was going to say equal measure, but it doesn't. It's not equal measure at all at the moment, but there you go.
Man. I mean, I'd say it really got a grip on me at a very good point in the Arsenal history, because I travelled around and I'd always liked Arsenal, but I'm from the West Country where, that's where I spent my teenage years, and I was surrounded by sort of rugby boys, and there's not, what I mean, people gurgling beer and wrestling each other for fun in the pub. It was so I liked Arsenal, and I'd actually been to Highbury a couple of times in the early 90s, but then I broke free from the British redneck world and ended up back in London. Even though I was born in London, I hadn't lived there for years. And I was in Camden. So I moved to Camden because as a musician, that was the Mecca, in sort of around the age of 16, 17. And we're talking, late 90s into the Invincibles.
Sure.
So, it was easy to fall properly in love at that point.
Yeah.
Being in Camden Town, in the indie scene, like Britpop and all that, and then into that era, it was delicious.
That's a good time to grow up in that particular area, isn't it? And to be, of that age where everything is just like, oh, this is great, music is great, football is great.
Yeah, man, it was great. I have very fond memories of that. I was working in nightclubs, pulling pints and zigzagging my way home, and just it was a delightful time, basically.
So what was music always your chosen career? Because I was looking around, before I talk to someone, I do try and find out a little bit about them, and I found a bit on you on a LinkedIn thing. And you play guitar, drums, sing, keyboards. I mean, that's quite a lot.
I drummed a lot. Drumming was my main thing. My dad was a successful musician in the 70s. He was in a kind of glam rock-ish, called Sailor, and they had a couple of hits in the 70s, 76, 77. So I grew up with musical instruments in the house.
Oh, okay.
And drums, I was a huge Ginger Baker fan because he was a massive Eric Clapton Cream obsessive. So grew up with that. And then was like, as a drummer, played in sort of 19 bands in London, and then I just got really fed up with waiting for lead singers to pull the fingers out and just get on with it. So I started teaching myself. I had like a vague understanding of guitars and keyboards and stuff. I just taught myself sort of everything. Over a year or two, I really cracked on.
At what age?
So we're talking late teens, 19, 20. And basically, and I coupled up with this other guy called Ben Hardy, and we made this thing called Repairman, which was a duo. But it was through necessity, because I was always felt like the most dedicated and most willing to put the time in to get something done. So in the end, I'm singing, playing guitar, did all the beats, sort of taught myself to produce. And like the first sort of demo we did, me and this other chap, we got a little record deal. And it was like almost the first song I'd ever completed with a verse, chorus, middle eight, and all that. I think it was an explosion of all kinds. Like we had this connection creatively. We taught ourselves to sort of produce. We both made records in other bands. I'd been a drummer. He'd done other things. But it was just like a coming together, this delicious thing of like, right, we're producers now. We're singers. And then it was like, do we put a band around this thing, the two of us? It was like, no, let's do this live, just the two of us. So we, it was a bit, we're talking 20 years ago. So it's a bit pre to what things now, the backing tracks. And if you want to run a string section now alongside your live performance, it's a hell of a lot easier. Back then, we had these, I borrowed a sampler off my old man, and we were triggering beats and we just worked out how the two of us should do it. And I'm sort of running from playing guitar, putting a guitar down. If there's a beat rolling, I'll run over to the kit, and then we'd add a couple of bars so it gives me a breath before I start singing lead, playing kit and breaks. And it was sort of organized chaos. It took us a while to get that to look good. But the tunes we'd agonized over definitely helped it. So we had this sort of album's worth of stuff and got ourselves, a nice financial injection through it was Jamiroquai's label at the time, but he just sold 26 million albums and was their management. He had a few quid, and which was at the time I was signing on, So it was like suddenly there's a guy with a gold credit card taking you out for dinner, and it was incredibly exciting. And they put us out. He treated us as if we were this. They'd only had Jamiroquai. So we suddenly had all this money, and we ended up touring, opening up for a bunch of bands who went on. It was like we called it the curse of Repairman in the end, because absolutely every band we opened up for or toured with sold 1 million records.
Except you.
We certainly did not do that. we sold a few. We got kudos and I'd learnt to play in huge rooms, so I was opening up for the likes of Athlete and Keane and Razorlight and Gomez. So at that era band, sort of post early noughties, late 90s stuff. And from that's how like some of the Lana's management knew me as the Repairman drummer that was a producer, and after Repairman finally ground to a halt, I sort of pushed my skills more into composing and doing film scores, and did some commercials for my sins, which is and things like that. Moved to Brighton and did that, alongside still playing in other bands and drumming and producing and stuff. But I think to get in the Lana world, they were interested in people that had some of those other skills, because she's got such a mixture textures and beats and things. So.
Yeah. So I mean, what's your can you choose between live and the studio? I mean, do you prefer one over the other? I mean, I guess if you're touring the world, the studio becomes very, very appealing after a while, because I'm sure the schedule is quite hectic and what have you. But are they, there's obviously a different buzz from both of them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Lana's live drummer, so that's been my job with her. That's the contract I have. I tour now with a neat little recording setup, so I've got like a drum sampler called a Machine, this German delightful droid. I've got this tiny little MIDI keyboard, and I tend to bring a guitar as well and a mic, and then you can do everything through the laptop. So whenever I get to a hotel room, which tends to be every other day, if it's a bus tour, you sleep one night on the bus and then the following day you get to the hotel. I just set up the little studio just so it's there in case I have the inclination to do something. But yeah, I just finished an instrumental album that I recorded last year on tour with Lana. It was all recorded doing that. And each track was recorded in a hotel room or, you know, occasionally in a dressing room or something. I might program some beats or something. But it was all done. That's the beauty of these devices now. I managed to get a decent enough sound. And I mixed it, you know, I get back to Brooklyn and mix it with an adult, just feed all the stuff through someone else's gear and pimp it, make it sound shinier.
Yeah. So what's the best thing about touring? I mean, is it the actual gigs themselves? I guess, you know, that live experience. I mean, you must get to go to some amazing places, but not necessarily see very much of them if you're sort of, you know, in and out and moving on to the next place. So
the best thing about playing Lana stuff, and I was a fan when I got the gig, and, you know, she fucking loved her stuff, you know. So that her connection with her fans is absolutely euphoric and mental. So you can always fall back on that. But I remember Charlie Watts, the Rolling Stones drummer, saying it's 5 years of working and 45 years of hanging about. so it's like the show itself is always wicked. You know, very rarely that you don't have a moment at some point, because we don't tour an awful lot, so the fans are so grateful, you know, to be there, and we put a lot of effort into getting the show together. So, and the video screens are a big part of it, and the lighting and all the rest of it. We have, you know, 2 backing singer dancers, so they have this kind of Shirelles-esque Motown little dance moments with Lana. So there's a lot going on in the show that obviously pleases the fans. It is frustrating touring. You know, you get to somewhere like that you've never been to, like Buenos Aires, you know, and you've heard so much about that place, and you get and I'll tend to just go, I'll do a solo day, you know, and just go covert, and it's like there's a huge outdoor cemetery there. I'm going to do that, go to a gallery, get a feast somewhere, and just try and do like a feast, something cultural and something else, and then just get back to the hotel for a pint. It's
probably easier for the drummer to do that than it is for the singer, if you like, to sort of just slip out and just...
Oh, yeah. I mean, I work very close to a rock star, but I'm not... I can stroll. There are fans that know us, and we end up doing a lot of selfies and stuff.
Sure.
But it's the Lana shows, you know. She has to go out covertly and in disguise or whatever if she wants to do that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, what sort of crowds are you playing to? I mean, you said in Chile it's 80,000. I mean, that's...
Well, with this plague that's stricken mankind, we were about to do... I mean, this was very exciting year. I was looking at the calendar. I was like, this is... Because there was festivals that we've done before, but we've gone up the bill to either like headlining or penultimate. So we were going to play Glastonbury Pyramid Stage.
Oh, wow.
Which we played before, and obviously as a West Country boy, we played that in 2014, and it was the stage that, you know, got me. You know, I was seeing Radiohead in 97 there, seeing The Cure when I was a tiny kid, because my mum used to do a stall at Glastonbury, so I'd go as a kid and see this stuff, always on the Pyramid Stage. So we got to do that in 2014 in the broad daylight in the afternoon, and it was, you know, singly the most terrifying and amazing day of my life as a musician. But we were meant to be playing that. I think we were going to be on just before the headline, which would have been Kendrick Lamar on the Friday night. And then we were going to do Coachella, you know, closing, or like same again, second to last before Frank Ocean. That's been, they've all been pushed. Glastonbury's obviously put off till next year. Coachella and the Lollapalooza South America tour, which is what I was really looking forward to, which is the biggest shows we played, which is, headlining what, like 100,000 people it was in Brazil last time.
Wow.
And so there was 5 of those playing Paraguay. We've never been to Paraguay, but Chile, Mexico, Brazil, and 4, 5, Argentina. Yeah. So those were moved. And there's a bunch of other festivals, some of which have been postponed or cancelled. Then we had a European tour, which got postponed as well. So that was playing in the O2 and things like that. So a bunch of, I never played the O2 before in London. That, lots of big ambitions that have been put off.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything, unfortunately, has been put off for a little while. And obviously we hope it's over sooner rather than later for everybody's sake. Just sort of finally, just bring it back around to Arsenal. Can you keep up pretty well on the road, and do you sort of try and mix with some of the other Arsenal fans, because obviously there are a load of Arsenal fans in New York?
Actually, there's a Dublin band. I know you're a Dubliner.
Yeah.
Is that Fontaine's DC?
Oh, Fontaine's DC. Yeah.
Yeah, who I really like. Very different to Lana World, but I just love that band. I loved because I'd lived in Dublin for a short while many moons ago. So I just love that it's kind of a cross between the Fall and a dub with a Dublin accent, and I don't know, it's just the whole, and I love his lyrics and stuff. But I think one of the guitarists or the bass player performs in an Arsenal strip, and I saw that they were playing the Pyramid stage at Glastonbury, so I was going to be like, I'm definitely going to find that chap. And
right, okay.
I mean, you and James honestly kept me sane and kept the soap opera. It feels more like a rolling storyline now, because there's so much content and so many places to be getting it. So, I listen to a lot of the podcasts. I'm always reading your blog, and obviously on Twitter there's 20 or 30 reputable-ish humans posting stuff. So I feel like it's needed, especially touring, because it's nothing to do with music. Music's very all-encompassing, and we put everything into that. So it's this glorious thing that I feel like I need it more when I'm touring, and I don't miss a game. I will stream everything. So this last 12 months, I've seen more Arsenal than ever. So watching it in like Colombia and shit.
Well, that's the thing now. You can watch it everywhere, can't you? You just need your laptop, half decent internet connection. You can stream everything.
Yeah, man. I've got it. I've missed a thing, and I've got this funny. When I'm back in New York, this weird sort of gang of people that will come and watch games if they're not the 7 a.m. ones. That's a bit full on. But, I used to go to the Blind Pig occasionally at 7 a.m. That place has moved on. And I remember the first time going into, I think it was a European thing. No, it was a Premier League game, 12 o'clock kickoff, so it's 7 a.m. And there was like 100 hammered Americans. But I found a few expats that day, and they ended up being part of my clan of, going to see games. But it's a shame the Blind Pig has moved on, isn't it?
Yeah, it's gone now. But I mean, I think there's a new bar uptown. I can't remember the name of it. There's O'Hanlon's as well on 14th, which is just down.
Yeah.
So, hello to Tom if you're listening.
As well,
Woodwork. That's over in Brooklyn, isn't it?
Yeah, that's just down the road from where I used to live. But that's one of the ones. But there's lots of soccer bars, where you've got all the games going on. So.
Sure, that's for sure. Our good friend Curtis is the head of the Arsenal NYC guys out there. He runs everything really well, and
I've been meaning to catch up with that guy at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd love to make contact. Well, look, Tom. Best of luck when you do get back on the road again, and
thank you, sir.
Hopefully your drum kits will all function correctly. Lots of time now to make sure that the electronics are right. There's no excuses. Nobody's got anything better to do right now.
Right. Well, one of my kits is I think in London. The other one's in LA. Neither of them made it back to New York. They're quarantined as well. So I look forward to seeing them again.
All right. Well, listen, good to talk to you. And, I'll keep up with your stuff on the Instagram as it gets going again. And
thank you so much, man. And thank you again for keeping me so plugged in and entertained over the years.
I'll do my best. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it as well. Good to chat, Tom. Take it easy.
Thanks, mate. Bye.
Cheers to Tom. He is on Twitter and Instagram at Tom Marsh Music. That is at Tom Marsh Music. Give him a follow. Right. We're going to leave it there for today. There's not a great deal more to talk about. No match to preview this weekend. Oh, maybe one day there'll be football again. I miss my five-a-side on a Friday night as well. I have to say, that was always a nice end to the week. Now I don't know what fucking day of the week it is. But look, it's a small complaint. It's a small price to pay to keep everybody healthy and well. Remember, we're all in this together. Look out for each other. Mind each other. Be careful. Do the right things. And have a great weekend, whatever you get up to. James and I will be here on Monday with an Arsecast Extra. So until then, take it easy. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Arsenal Football Club today announced that players would be returning to training as soon as next week. However, they will have to practice social distancing. This means no player can come within 2 meters of another. Chairman Sir Chips Keswick said, "This'll be easy for them. All they gotta do is remember how they defended with Unai Emery in charge." Boom, boom! Shake, shake the room. 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 Shake